joined us. Thank you so much and welcome to the seventh webinar from the ongoing series on specific learning disorders. Today, we'll be talking about understanding dyscalculia or difficulties in mathematics with none other than Madam Geetha Gopi, our speaker for the series. But before we move on to that and talk more about today's session, let me tell you a little bit about Ability. For us as an organization, all carers of children with special needs, that is therapists, special educators, teachers, and of course, parents, you all are at the center of our universe. Our mission is to make things easier for you all. And when we say easier, we mean making it more accessible, making it more affordable, and most important of all, making it much more effective for you all. Because every child wants to thrive, right? And every child should be given the opportunity to thrive. One way we have been able to deliver on our mission is through the aid of technology, but we definitely realize and understand that technology alone is not sufficient. While technology could help a lot, without the caregivers, it is insufficient. It is only a support system, and there are other support systems required, such as community, resources. And that's what we bring to you as an organization, because no one should have to do this alone. Ability brings to you community and host of other resources to enable the best chance of discovering your child's true potential. One of the ways we bring to you the resources is through our YouTube videos and YouTube channel. The channel has more than 100 of videos and very useful ones which you can watch and benefit your child with special needs. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please go to YouTube and search for EBLITY, and please do subscribe to the channel to stay posted with the updates. The link for the channel is also being shared in the chat box right now by our team members. So if you want to check it out, go check it out right now. Apart from that, thousands of people also follow our Facebook page, so you could also be one of them and join them in staying updated about all the upcoming ability events, which could help you a lot in helping your child with special needs. We have been conducting webinars. This webinar is no different. It is for the purpose of foundational knowledge building. And we have also been conducting workshops. Workshops has a different setting altogether. It is organized for a smaller group setting so as to facilitate interactive learning with the speaker. In the sense, we offer a chance to interact directly and learn directly from the expert in the workshop setting. So if you haven't yet experienced an ability workshop, do register for our upcoming workshops. Keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending you updates about the workshops lined up in the month of March. So without any further delay, coming to our ongoing series, like the ones who have attended the past webinars must already know, this is the last webinar for the series. We, in the past 6 webinars, we have talked about basic introduction of SLD, identification and diagnosis, how to plan instruction for children with SLD, support systems for children with SLD, and about 2 other specific learning disorder, that is dyslexia and dysgraphia. If you want to watch the recordings of any of these past webinars, you could create your account in the Ability platform and watch all these past webinars. And if you have already registered for the entire series, you should receive the links to watch these webinars in the past. And yeah, today we are at the last one for understanding dyscalculia, difficulties in mathematics. So without any delay, let me come to our speaker for the day. Most of you must already know her, but it is my duty to introduce her and also fill her with words of praise, because despite being so unwell today, she is so dedicated to serving the community. She has made the effort of joining us today and conducting this webinar. Madam Geetha Gopi, the Director of Programs at the Sashakti Trust, with over 30 years of experience in helping children with special needs. She has worked with international schools Following an American curriculum, she does intensive work in curriculum development and adaptations, behavioral management, coordinating and promoting best educational practices with using UDL principles among staff and parents. Also, she has launched Early Academic Series, which is a teacher's kit for teaching early English language skills and basic mathematics based on universal design of learning. So now you know how much her experience is going to be valuable for you all when she starts speaking on today's topic. So I would not take much of her time and would request her to take over. Over to you, Geetha ma'am.
Okay, I hope I'm audible. Um,
Yes, you are.
yeah, I don't really have a good voice, so please excuse me if I don't sound good. Um, Today is we are coming to the fag end of the series on SLD webinars. So without much ado, I'll just go into, doing a quick recap of what we did last webinar. Okay, going into the last webinar, we had talked about dysgraphia or writing difficulties. Writing difficulties that are seen in children with specific learning disorders. We had discussed about issues that pertain to handwriting, that is the physical, manual process of writing, and also expressive writing, which is creative writing, that is being able to express your thoughts and ideas and communicate them through the process of writing. And we had looked at both these skills and what is necessary, a rough guideline on how these need to be developed and so on, and how they can be interlinked with whatever other subject areas or domains you're doing, because writing is usually an end product of different content matter. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing languages or math, science or social studies, whatever it is, you can bring in a writing component into that. And it makes more sense because then the writing is much more meaningful when it is attached to content that you have already covered. Just excuse me, I'm just having some trouble in this moving.
Ma'am, would you like to use the arrow keys
Yeah, I am using it, and
or
I
maybe
don't
the
know.
enter button?
Even then, it's not moving. It's got stuck.
In that case, you might want to stop sharing and start sharing again.
Yeah, I would just do that. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, so our focus today, in today's webinar, we are going to talk about the different kinds of math difficulties seen in children with SLD. What are basically what we know as the number sense, basic arithmetic skills, um, as well as fluency and maths as a life skill. Because again, even if they have difficulties in academic math, life skill maths is also usually affected. So it is very important to at least teach math as a life skill as well. So, what is dyscalculia? Just as we talked about earlier, conditions such as dyslexia and dysgraphia, this is again a neurological condition which makes it hard for children to do math or tasks or activities that involve mathematical concepts or number sense. It impairs an individual's ability to learn not only numbers or concepts which are related to numbers, that is ordering or sequencing numbers according to, less than, more than, and so on. See, sequencing numbers as in, what number comes before, what number comes after, etc. Perform basic math calculations, that is, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Be able to read math problems, especially the word problems, and reason out what is happening in those problems, and then be able to solve them. That is, being able to connect the language and translate it into mathematical operations, and perform other math skills such as, fractions, measurement, graphing, and so on. So all the other kind of math skills that are related with geometry, data, and so on. And it is very similar to what we understood in dyslexia. So dyscalculia is also known as number dyslexia or math dyslexia. What we have to understand is when we are talking about dyscalculia also, there are certain underlying skills and processes. And just like with the writing and reading disorders, even in math, it is the fundamental underlying processes that are impaired, which leads to or manifests as symptomatic difficulties in the area of math. So some of the skills and processes that underlie development of math concepts are, being able to match one on one, like for example being able to match colors or to match shapes or to match one object to another. So being able to match is a very important skill. Sorting and classifying, that is being able to see similarities and differences between things. It doesn't have to be only numbers. It can, as I said, it can be anything from objects to colors to shapes to numbers to alphabets, anything at all. Even even the vegetables or fruits you buy, being able to see how things are similar, and it is a one up on the matching. So, how you can sort, classify, and group them according to similarities and differences. So, that is a very underlying skill that involves development of math concepts. Being able to compare. Again, these are all very closely related. From matching, you come into sorting and classifying. When you're sorting and classifying, obviously, you're comparing the things. And not only comparing the external characteristics such as colors or shapes or whatever, you also end up comparing quantities. That is that is one of the early steps of developing a number sense. That is being able to compare size. For example, what is big, what is small, or if there are two or three objects given, whether you can, you can put it in order of from smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest, etc. Same way with numbers. If you give numbers or number of objects in certain groups, can you quantify it and, sequence it in either in the from the smallest to biggest, more to less, less to more, least to the most, etc. Length, again, size of things, length of pencils, for example. Children usually compare this in school. It's very common. So whether they're able to, to do these kind of comparing quantities which are related to numbers. And you will find that in many of the preschool curricula, a lot of these activities are actually given. And if the children have trouble with these activities in the preschool level itself, that is an indicator that they may have difficulties with math later on. So it is important to recognize these at these early stages and start working on them. Visualization is making a mental image of the numbers that you're thinking. So for example, if we say 2 plus 1, being able to imagine that in the head and come up with the answer. So making mental images and doing a mental calculation. Again, these children have a difficulty with, and this is something which we find even in children with reading difficulties. When they read, they do not necessarily make mental images automatically. So we have to, when they are reading math problems and such things, we have to make sure that we help them with this visualization through drawings or through actual objects. So they have difficulty with visualizing or making mental images of what they are seeing, especially math related problems. Ability to follow directions or the procedures. For example, if you have to do a certain calculation, what is it that you do first? What do you do next? What do you do third? So a step by step, a sequential following of the procedure for calculation. They may have difficulties in doing that. Sometimes they may jump steps and so on. So again, following directions and following in a logical sequence. Spatial orientation and space organization. We talked about this when we talked about dyscalculia, dysgraphia. Again, being able to align things in space, being able to align numbers in a sequence, or being able to write numbers, especially when you're setting up a problem. If you're writing two numbers that you want to add, to write them in a straight line so that you add in the correct places. And this becomes even more complicated when there are more than, from single digit, when you move to double or multi-digit addition, subtraction, etc. If they do not align the numbers in the correct spaces, they have difficulty with calculating them and they can make errors. Estimation is not exactly counting correctly, but just to make a guess, an educated guess of how much. For example, if you show them a bottle of say a cookie jar, roughly to be able to estimate, are there 10 biscuits in the jar, or are there 50 biscuits in the jar, to make a reasonably sensible estimate of what the number may be. They don't have to count, but estimation is a way of how we do lot of things in our daily life. Even things like, if you want to empty, say, a packet of pulses we've bought into a jar, we'll have to choose a jar which is reasonably in accordance with how much the packet looks like, how big the packet is, how much the content is. So we make a rough estimation of, okay, this bigger jar will be enough to put these things in. So that is estimation, and see how it really affects everyday life. So estimation is again another key skill in math, which is necessary for math number skill development. Being able to understand patterns, again, things which repeat in the same fashion over and over again. So numbers, whether it is time, whether it is calendar, all these things are repeating itself in a cyclic fashion. So being able to understand and recognize those patterns, and being able to predict what number will come next, or what day of the week will come next, and so on. So understanding that kind of a pattern is again very key underlying skill in math development. So when we talk about addressing math difficulties, we know that in these areas these children will have, these skills and processes would be affected. And why should we really intervene? Why should we really address it as early as possible? It is because, just like with dyslexia, because it is an intrinsic neurodevelopmental disorder, they do not automatically outgrow this. Children who have a hard time with math will continue to experience that even as adults in some way or the other. So what we need to do is intervene as early as possible, so that they can be, their math skills can be improved to the maximum extent possible. And then if there are certain areas where we know there may always be a lacunae, then give them certain other assistive technology like calculators or things like that, which can help them cope with these kind of math difficulties or math challenges they may have. So when we know that these are the underlying skills and processes that affect math, we can make use of activities which will promote these skills, so that we put them on the path to better number sense development. And for this, the good thing is math permeates almost every area of our life. Everyday tasks such as cooking, whether it is shopping, whether it is stitching, time management, scheduling, or following a timetable, all these things involve basic math skills. And you can use all these everyday tasks as part of training for the children to develop these underlying skills and processes that need to go with development of math skills. So the some of the commonly seen difficulties in the math area. Coming back to more specifics, children have difficulties processing numbers and quantities. That is, being able to connect a number or a numeral to the quantity it represents. So, for example, if there is a number five, five means five fingers, or five oranges, whatever. To associate the shape of the number, the actual numeral, to the quantity it represents, and vice versa. So if given the quantity, being able to see the number in there, that is one area. Rote and meaningful counting. Rote counting, most kids generally pick it up easily, but children with SLD may have difficulty there. So you will find that even if they are just counting, reciting 1 to 10 or 1 to 20, they may be skipping numbers in between. And this is very, very commonly seen in children who do have learning problems. In rote counting itself, they might be skipping numbers. So this is a very clear indicator that, they are somewhere along the lines they're having difficulties. Meaningful counting. Meaningful counting is not just reciting the numbers, but actually being able to count pictures, or actually being able to count number of objects. While they are counting, they should be one-to-one correspondence. That is, when they are counting, the touching the object or pointing to the object, and the reciting of the numbers should be in synchronization with one another. And normally you will find, if children have math difficulties, their counting may be going at a certain pace. Their pointing to the object might be going at a different pace, so that there won't be a sync. It won't be aligned. So again, these kind of difficulties are usually seen. Being able to compare and order two or more numbers, especially with children with learning difficulties, we find with two numbers itself, they find it difficult to compare and order. But if you give more numbers, especially in our schools, when they talk about ascending numbers or descending numbers, where you have to arrange 3 to 5 numbers from the least to the most, or from reverse, from most to least, they have difficulties. And usually with these children, it's easier to start with smaller numbers. So when you're with the single digit numbers itself, start comparing and ordering them. Start with numbers within 5 itself, start with comparing and ordering. Yes, when you go to 10, do the same thing. It is only then when they come to higher numbers, such as within 100, then they begin to, realize, okay, it is the same way. You have to, this is how, what we did with the smaller numbers, it's the same thing that is continuing with the higher level numbers. So always start with these skills right from the smaller numbers, because it is easier to teach the concepts of comparing and ordering and all this with the smaller numbers first. So start with that and give them enough practice, and then move on to the larger numbers. And normally we find in a lot of schools, in the smaller numbers, they don't do a lot of comparison work. Instead, they just focus on reading and writing numbers. And then suddenly all this comparing and ordering of numbers, sequencing of numbers from more to less or less to more happens with the bigger numbers suddenly. And these children then don't make the connections. So start doing those skills right from the smaller numbers itself. Estimation. Estimation, again, give little exercises like recognize quantities without counting. For example, ask them to hold something in one hand, maybe hold a few beads in one hand. Just grab a few beads and ask them to guess, how many beads do you think you can hold in one hand? Is it, and give them a rough estimate. Do you think there are 5 beads in your hand, or 10 or 100? So they see, and then they can go back and check and see. So that you give these kind of exercises to make them understand that their numbers should come, when they estimate, the numbers should come closer to the quantity that it actually is. So doing a lot of these activities can help. Recalling basic math facts, like doubles or skip counting, or multiplication tables, remembering these, learning these, remembering these, and recalling these when necessary. Again, they may have difficulties in this area. while they are doing calculations or computing, many of them take a long time. They are very slow in computing, so the speed of calculation is really less, and they may take a long time to calculate what other children might be doing at a much faster rate. And also there may be a lot of errors that come into, despite doing it so slowly and carefully, there might still be a lot of errors that might be creeping in. So basically math fluency, that is the speed and accuracy, might be affected. Doing mental math, many of these children really have difficulty in doing mental math, imagining the numbers in their head and trying to calculate. uh, so that is another commonly seen difficulty. So normally, unless they are ready for it or there are specific strategies we use, I usually prefer not to tax them to do mental math. Instead, I usually ask them to stick to tangible counting. Only thing, I move from maybe from tangible objects like counters and beads and so on, and then probably move on to a more 2D kind of thing such as number lines. But again, it is still tangible, because even if they do develop mental math, there is a tendency, especially when they are tired, etc., to make mistakes. So it's better they have something tangible in front of them. Even if they do acquire the skills of mental math, they can go back and cross check with the tangible number line or finger counting and so on. Logical reasoning and problem solving, such as in word problems. So, being able to read, to comprehend, to break down the content that is given in word problems, and to logically reason out. Okay, this is what the problem is saying. So, what do I have to do? What operation do I have to choose? Whether is it addition, or is it subtraction? Is it multiplication or division? What do I have to choose to solve this problem? What are the key words that are present in the word problems which give an indicator about what operation should I use? So being able to understand a little story around the word problem and be able to comprehend and reason it out and bring it down to what mathematical operation to use. Again, in this area, children do have difficulties. And then making sense of money, uh, using money using money for transactions, understanding how much of, if you pay something to the shopkeeper, how much of balance you need to get, or if you need to give a certain amount of money, what are the different denominations you can use to uh, make up the same amount of money. For example, if it's 10 rupees or 100 rupees, what are the different combinations of notes, currency you can use to make that same amount. So, basic making sense of money. Being able to tell time on an analog clock. Analog clock is where there are numbers, and being able to read time on that, and keeping track of time. For example, if we say wait for 10 minutes, or set an activity and tell them after 10 minutes you have to um, you have to finish up. So even understanding how long a time that is, when we say 10 minutes duration, to mentally have a rough estimate in their mind, they may have difficulties. And that is why sometimes, a lot of times, we have to give timers or indicators of getting them to understand, okay, the time is finishing up, and they should be given signals and cues to this. Recognizing patterns, as I already said, something that is repetitive, making them aware of how the patterns are happening is important. Again, learning the basic math operations, that is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Understanding fractions, that is whole and parts of a whole, how they relate to each other. If you want to cut something into and share it equally among people, how can you use fractions for that? Understanding the concept of graphs and charts, that is visual spatial concepts. How can you use numbers and translate that into the form of charts or graphs, or as bar graphs or as pictographs, etc. So the same information, how can data be translated from a numerical thing to a more visual concept? Understanding the connection between the two. Measurements, again, measuring length, measuring weight and all these things, measuring out even volume like cups, spoons, etc. So in all these, difficulties may be seen. And when we address these difficulties, what do we have to do? Use manipulative tools. That is very, very key in using in math. Use manipulative tools such as counters, use beads, anything at all that you can use for counting. Use a number line, which is a great resource for uh, for doing basic math operations or understanding numbers. Use a calculator as required if the children are, especially in the higher classes, enable the use of calculators, so that just because the calculation part is is a struggle for the child does not have to stop with their math learning. Okay, so use these kind of manipulative tools. Use a squared notebook to align numbers in the correct places, especially when we talk about place value. When we talk about ones, tens, hundreds, and aligning numbers and writing the numbers down and then adding them up and so on. Use squared notebook, and I would prefer using squared notebook as my all through the primary, definitely in primary or elementary schooling. Use squared notebooks. Generally we have a tendency that in the younger classes, maybe in KG and grade 1 and 2, we use squared books, and then we move out of it. It's better not to move out of it, not just for children with SLD, but even for other children, because then aligning the numbers becomes much more easier. When they get that practice throughout primary or elementary, it becomes easier for the children to visualize the numbers in that line and accurate places. So, and for children with SLD, with their space and line orientation issues, this is particularly important that you use squared notebooks. Praise their hard work and not just the outcome. That is, again, even if their answers may be wrong, if they've made an attempt to do it, go back to that and give them a way of self correction. So, usually, what I do is if they have done some, say, simple addition, if they've used the procedure that they have been taught, ask them to draw a picture or ask them to use the manipulative side by side to cross check whether the procedure they've used is right or not. One of the ways I also do is, I get them to verbalize or think aloud the procedure. So say the procedure while you're doing it. So the more you say it while you're doing it, the logical sequence of step one, step two, step three, etc., gets ingrained in them. And after a while, even if they don't say it aloud, it starts ringing in them when they start seeing the problems. Then, excuse me, as much as possible, relate the math concepts to real life situations. So, have a simulated shopping situation in the classroom, where even if you're teaching single digit addition, relate it, connect it to how can be used in the real life situation. So you can talk about, okay, so and so has two notebooks and so has three. Now, if I need to know how many books are there all together, so what do I do? And you can use tangible objects like that from the classroom itself to connect it to real life situations and make it more meaningful. Making these things more meaningful definitely adds a much higher layer of comprehension of these concepts. And if you're talking about higher level math, and many of us, even as educators, I personally also am not a very math teacher. I can manage up to middle school, but when it comes to high school, where the math concepts are more, very abstract and more very highly math oriented, a lot of educators, unless you're a math teacher, you may not be experienced enough to understand those concepts and teach them. So in such cases, usually get the help of an experienced math tutor, especially with higher level math concepts, which as an educator, we may not be equipped to teach, at least the content part of it. But you can collaborate with the math teacher and explain where exactly this child might need help, like in the procedures or in the calculations, or, in which area this child might need an accommodation or an assistance. And that can add on to whatever the math tutor is teaching. So when we talk about instruction, the instruction need to focus on enhancing skills So the math readiness skills that I talked about, all the readiness skills are, the sorting and classifying, the array, ordering and sequencing skills, understanding patterns, understanding, being able to read, comprehend, and then translate that into a mathematical concept. So all these are math readiness skills, the prerequisites which actually lay the foundation for developing math skills. So all those things need to be worked on. And the good thing is, a lot of these math readiness skills can be done in everyday life activities. Use math vocabulary, teach math vocabulary. This is one thing which a lot of us don't seem to do, especially in the younger classes. We just concentrate a lot on calculations, how to add or how to subtract, how to multiply, etc. We do not spend enough time in teaching the key vocabulary. The key vocabulary means, for example, if you're talking about addition, words like altogether or in all or total, sum. These are all the words, or plus. These are all the words that relate to addition. So understanding that when you see these words in a math problem or in a directions that in the math exercise, then these will automatically be connected to addition. So understanding and teaching these connective vocabulary is very, very important, because drawing their attention to these clue vocabularies will help them to process the information better and to connect that information or the language of math into mathematical sentences. That is, after reading the story problem, if they have to write the numerical sentence of to solving it, that translation becomes much easier when you teach these key math vocabulary which is associated with different math operations. um, Core numeracy skills. Core numeracy skills is again understanding the basic number concept, understanding what numbers come before, what comes after, what comes between, which is greater, which is lesser. These are the kinds of core numeracy skills, and then of course slightly higher level skills such as odd numbers, even numbers. The all these things come under core numeracy skills. Also things like skip counting, counting by twos, skip counting by fives, counting by tens, and so on. That is finding patterns in numbers where you are jump sequencing or jumping and counting. So all these form part of core numeracy skills. The important thing, again, I'm reiterating that all these skills should be introduced right at the small number level itself. So when you're starting with pre-KG itself, or when you're starting with small numbers itself, introduce these concepts. If you are teaching numbers from 0 to 5, within that 0 to 5 itself, teach them which is greater, which is lesser, and relate that on a number chart, or a number line. So they see that the numbers towards the left of the number line is smaller, but as you go further up the number line, the numbers are getting bigger or more. So relate that to a number poster, a 1 to 100 poster, or things. And in the smaller numbers itself, all these concepts have to be taught. So within 0 to 5 itself, you're teaching all these concepts, and then you go to 0 to 10. Slowly you build it up until 20, 50, and so on. So all these skills that I'm talking about, they shouldn't wait until the children have learned how to write 1 to 100 or learned numbers 1 to 100 by rote. Just reading and writing numbers alone is not enough. Within the reading and writing numbers, these concepts have to be taught in graduated manner. So start with the smaller numbers, do those concepts, move to slightly higher numbers, but again reiterate and repeat these concepts with the slightly higher numbers. At least till numbers 1 to 100, if you repeat these concepts over and over again and the children are fairly thorough, then 100 upwards, the numbers become much easier. So the strong foundation is where, right from the smaller numbers to numbers within 100, when you're teaching all these concepts. So do focus on that. Using operations, that is the symbols of plus, minus, multiply, and divide, associating those symbols with how to do that, how to calculate that. So when you're teaching basic operations of add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you have to not only say how to do it, how is basically how we are going to calculate. That is the procedure. But we also have to teach them why we are doing it. Why are we adding? Or when we are adding, what is happening? What are we doing? So the core concept of what is happening when you're with what the two numbers that you're doing. So if you're saying 5 plus 3, what is happening there? You actually have to visualize it and show it to them that when there is 5 and when there is 3 and when you're doing 5 plus 3, you're actually putting them together. Or there is already 5 and 3 more are coming in there to join them, so that group is getting bigger. So that is what is happening. So that is why you have to add. So associating that event or that happening that is taking place to the symbol and the procedure that you have to use in according to the symbol, that connection is very, very important. So why I'm saying this is that is what makes meaning into what they're doing. Many of our children, if they don't have a severe dyscalculia problem, if their main problem is in dyslexia, they may learn how to calculate, just by practice. Okay, this is how we add, this is how we subtract. They may do that, but they may still not understand why they are doing it. So the why is very, very important. For every problem that we do, reiterate when we are adding, what is happening, or when we are subtracting, what are we doing. When we are comparing two groups of objects, then we always subtract. And why are we subtracting? If from one group and a group is taken away, we are subtracting. So what is happening there? It is becoming lesser. So this what is happening in that event, that should be related to the symbol as well as the procedure on how to solve it. And this is best used when you do it on the worksheet, but as well as do it side by side with concrete objects or through pictures, and relate the two. So even if the child has learned how to calculate just by by procedural calculation, ask them to verify it, recheck it themselves by drawing a picture or by using counters or beads. So especially in the early stages, because when they start associating and seeing that their procedure is being verified and rechecked through the pictures or through the counters, then they can feel confident that the procedure they are using is correct. So that confidence building is also a part of uh, addressing these math difficulties, because many a time these children don't have that confidence that they've done it right, and they're always looking to us for reassurance. So giving them a tool, giving them a way of cross checking it themselves, where, okay, they do 5 plus 3 equals 8, let them draw the picture. 5, so draw 5 circles. 3, draw 3 circles. Plus means you count them all up together. That's 8. So they have cross verified. What they did through the procedure is verified and rechecked, and they've checked whether what they've done is correct or not. So that builds up a confidence. And do that with the young small numbers itself, single digit itself. Start doing this, so they become confident of the procedures that they are using, and always connected to what is up. Because when you do this in tangible objects or by drawing pictures, definitely the why also gets in. Like, why are you adding in this situation? Why are you subtracting? So the relevance of what operation to use in what situation becomes more apparent to them. And then, of course, last but not the least, developing fluency. Fluency, again, just with writing and reading, fluency means a combination of speed and accuracy. So how fast they can do, and with how fewer errors they can do. And this, again, it is pure drills and practice. And normally what we do is, usually we give things like 1 minute math drill. So every day, 1 minute, whatever math concepts you're doing, you give 1 minute time and let the children solve. There is no pressure on the children on that they have to solve so many. Sometimes they may solve only one, sometimes they may solve only two. That's fine. But after 1 minute, you stop. And every day this is done. And every day we can look at their, the kind of errors they are making. And you get an idea when you do this error, look at the errors they're making, you get an idea. Some children may be doing things fast, but they may be making a lot of errors. Some children may be doing it slowly, but the errors, they'll be doing it fairly accurately. So you get an idea about what the child's strengths are, what the child's weaknesses are, and how you can step it up. So if the child is doing too fast and making too many errors, you have to ask them to slow down, do fewer problems, do it slowly, say the procedure step by step, and then only do it, not rush through the calculations. If the child is doing very slowly, initially you can give, say, so many problems in 5 minutes time, and then slowly increase it, step up as the child learns better and becomes faster with time. You can increase the number of problems within that time frame. So slowly you can develop this kind of fluency. But having said that, we have to again understand many of our children don't just have a math problem. They may be having a reading problem, or they may be having a copying, writing problem. They may be having problems copying from the board. So if children have these issues, again, as I said earlier in the earlier webinars, reduce the unnecessary copying. So don't let them copy the math problems. Instead, give them printed worksheets so they can only focus on reading the math problem and solving it. So most of their attention, energy, and focus can be just on how to solve it. Okay, so this way we can develop fluency, and then bring about meaningfulness in activities, into bring meaningfulness into all the math activities you're doing. So sorting and grouping. So many domestic chores, such as folding your clothes and putting them away in different categories, like putting all your pants in one group, putting your t-shirts in one group, or even if you washed, washing your cutlery in the kitchen. After that, organizing the, putting all the spoons where it should go, putting all the plates or glasses or cups in the proper areas. Even after you come back from shopping, sorting out the fruits and vegetables and putting them in different packets and putting them away. Any kind of sorting and grouping, whichever comes as a part of your everyday activities, involve the child in all those things. And these are some of the homework activities I usually tell parents to do, not necessarily do paper pencil math activities. So as because these activities definitely have a positive impact on ultimately whatever math academic skills you're going to do. Doing mental math, again, maybe initially you can start off with small numbers. You have 5 chocolates, and if I give one more, how many would that be? So just add one more, and then probably then go on to two more, and so on, and use objects which they are which arouses their interest. So again, helping them to do simple mental math things really help. Logical excuse me, logical reasoning and problem solving, again, use your everyday situations. For example, if you're cooking, if for 1 cup, if you say you're making tea, for 1 cup of tea you're using one the spoon of sugar. So if you're making 2 cups, how many spoons of sugar would you need? So again, these they can do hands on and figure it out, and the more they do these hands on, the more kinesthetic tactile learning takes place, and definitely that has a much learning by doing definitely has a positive impact on being able to do this. Even things like, okay, when I go to a shop, if I want to buy one object and the other object, what do I do with those? I know this object costs so much, the other object costs so much. So if I have to buy both these, what do I have to do? So then, okay, I'm putting it together. So when I put it together, I add, basically being able to logically reason out an everyday life situation and how you bring math into it. So this definitely helps in word problems and so on. Again, making sense of money, get children to use money in go to shops, at least start with small money denominations. Get them to understand how much is this money, how much they have to pay. If the object costs so much, how much is it how much balance would they have to get, and so on, and try using it on a calculator, so that initially at least it gives them a sense of they don't have to tangibly do it there. They can come and reason it out and do those kind of simulated things within the classroom or in the home situation. uh, Teaching time on an analog clock. Now, this I kind of vary it. It depends if the child really finds it very, very difficult. Nowadays, in most places, you find digital clocks, so it's not absolutely necessary that they learn on an analog clock. But if they do, if the children have been taught skip counting by fives and all that, we can use modified analog clocks where they can be taught how to read analog clocks. Many of them do learn how to do it, but if they have serious issues with it, I would say just stick to digital reading. Keeping track of time, that is what is more important. How to manage a schedule, how to understand, okay, 10 minutes means it's this long. So sometimes I do little activities like, I would tell them, okay, let's all stand up. Okay, I get them to stand up. I tell them, okay, we'll all keep standing for half a minute or 1 minute. And then after that, I asked them to sit down, and I said, do you realize how long it was? Okay, that is how long 1 minute is. But then if you say, okay, now is the math lesson, after this, the next lesson is the English lesson. So after the math lesson comes the English. So see how long that time is in comparison to how much time you stood for 1 minute. So, is 1 minute short, or is 40 minutes or 1 hour, one period long? So understanding that kind of a thing. And again, give a visual timetable. Normally what I do is I usually put up the timetable on a classroom thing, and after each lesson is over, I erase that, what I've written. So if the math lesson is over, the math is erased. And then they can see that the rest of the periods are remaining. Or when the breaks are there, I usually put the breaks in a different color on the board. So when the breaks are going to come, or when the PT is going to come. Because many of these children are very interested in art and craft or PT, or anything that they can get out of tabletop work. So many of them want to know, okay, when is our PT? Especially in the younger classes, they'll keep coming and asking the teacher all the time. And you can avoid all this unnecessary asking. And if you put up a visual timetable and take them through it every day morning, okay, this is what you're having. And even if they come and ask, you can redirect them to the visual timetable on the classroom board and tell them, look, this lesson is over, so you erase that lesson off. Next is break, and then after that there's one more lesson, and then there's PT. So they get a mental estimate, slowly every day when this is happening, or every week when this is happening, they get a mental estimation about, okay, one period means about roughly around this much long. So they know they have to wait that much. And when after each lesson is over, when you're erasing it off, then they know, okay, it is coming closer to whichever preferred period they are they're looking forward to. So all that, gives them, helps them to make a sense of keeping track of time. And also for many of these children, giving a timetable to follow, a daily activity schedule. Okay, at this time do this, at this time do this. That helps them stay focused, keep on deadline, and etc. So, especially if they have ADHD, many of them have trouble with time organization, time management. So giving a visual schedule always helps, because then they can just go back to the schedule and remind themselves, okay, what do they have to do next, so that they don't get scattered and lose track of time. Recognizing patterns is everywhere, as I said, whether it is the seasons, whether it is life cycles of animals, plants, whether it is the calendar where the days of the week or the months, the calendar dates, these all repeat themselves in certain recognizable patterns. You can also make patterns with shapes and colors in your art and craft activities. So when they make these different patterns using rangolis in the Indian context, many of us have, different kinds of rangolis that we use, which are either floral patterns or patterns that we make using different colored powders, or you can even draw these patterns using, dots. uh, that again, these are all very things which are intrinsic to our cultural habits and traditions, which all have a good understanding of recognizing and continuing patterns, of understanding symmetry. For it helps in better visual spatial organization. So use these kind of things that are in your environment to develop these kind of skills. Use a lot of art and craft, a lot of geometrical concepts such as shapes, congruence, symmetry. All these you can use a lot of art and craft activities that can be incorporated into this. Even games, music and dance. Again, rhythm, sense of rhythm, repetition of pattern. All this comes through music and dance movements as well. So because the same steps get repeated or the same rhythm gets repeated. Uh, when you learn a song, the initial two lines get, the chorus gets repeated and so on. So that all this helps in understanding, recognizing and extending patterns. Managing money, figuring out distance, about how long it is to get to some place. When you're starting to go somewhere, ask them to, let's check how much time, when did we start, and when we get there, how long did it take us. So figuring out, okay, roughly to go this far we may take this much of time. So to make a mental estimate and then ask them, okay, tomorrow if you're going to this place, maybe it is another place but similar distance, so maybe it will take us the same time, or approximately the same time to get there. Same way to estimate the cost of travel. So if you're traveling this much distance, maybe the bus fare is so much, or maybe the auto fare is so much. So if you're traveling more than that, maybe it will be, if it is 30 rupees or 40 rupees for this much distance, maybe for so much extra, it would be this much. So you have at least a rough estimate of this much money you should carry. Giving that kind of real life experiences, using those kind of situations to enhance their understanding of math. Use all kinds of domestic chores, gardening, sewing, organizing, cutlery, washing, even using a washing machine, cooking, how much detergent, even getting them to even operate household appliances like a mixer grinder or a washing machine. All these kind of things actually help in understanding what quantity to put, because you're going to do it for so many clothes. If you're going to wash, then you need to put so many spoonfuls or measurements of detergent to use it for this much amount of clothes. So all this helps them develop a sense of math or a number sense, which ultimately not only teaches them how to acquire a life skill, but also how it can be made useful in a how these math that they're learning in the books is actually relevant to their everyday life. The problem with a lot of math skills, especially as we go into higher classes, including people like me, you, or anyone who are not math teachers, we realize that a lot of the high school or the abstract level maths we learned, we don't even find it very useful in our daily life situation, which is why we tend to forget them or not understand them anymore, especially if you're not teaching it or if you're not applying it in our everyday life. So it is important that if children have math issues and that they may have to, many of them may have to drop math in their high school. If you find that with the basic math itself they are struggling, and they're simply not able to get into the abstract level maths. So nowadays a lot of the boards do allow for subject drop option, so they can drop math is one of the most commonly dropped subjects that we find, and they can take other alternative subjects instead of math. But again, here we have to remember that they may not be doing high school math, but life skill math is still very important. At least whatever is necessary for them to function properly in life, that kind of math has to be taught. And of course you can use manipulators such as calculators and other assistive things to aid in it, because things like shopping or whatever things you're doing, cooking and all this requires math skills. But again, these are much easier to teach because it's learning by doing, and therefore but those have to be taught even if those children are dropping math as an academic subject in high school because of the difficulty that they are facing. So connecting math to real life situations as much as possible. Helps not only in developing a good math sense and number sense and using them functionally in your life, but it also helps set a good foundation for math, at least for the functional math level, developing functional math skills which will see them through life. So it is important to understand that teaching math as a life skill is very, very important. So bring that component into every math skill that you're teaching right from the young ages, and that will definitely help them develop a much stronger foundation in math skills. So that brings us to an end of this webinar and this series. I hope I have been able to convey uh, uh, what I intended to. Thankfully, my voice didn't break up. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Geetha ji. That was an excellent session, undoubtedly, and an excellent series. To all the attendees, I would like to inform the next webinar from Ability is scheduled on 23rd of February. Any one of you who is interested can visit on the link in the chat box, which is being shared by our team members. You can register. If you already have an Ability account, please log in and register. From now on, we'll be using your Ability account for making the registration process much more easier for you, and also for the purpose of record maintenance. Apart from that, this webinar is specially for professionals. So how to supercharge your career as a special educator. If you're interested to learn more about it, please do visit the link and register for it right now. Apart from that, you have got access to the Ability platform and the resources. If you haven't yet signed up, please do that with the link being shared in the chat box. Okay, let us, since we have overshot the time already, we will quickly take few of the questions that we have received from our participants and try to wrap this session. The first one, Geetha ji, is from Tahani Yunus. Tahani is asking how to help an 8 years old boy who seems to be moderately hyperactive with strong memory, talented at drawing, collage, and creative playing, but still he struggles in learning maths. So, what could be the issue here, and how to help this child?
You've already identified the strength of the child, right? The child really loves drawing, and so bring your math into that. Use always, if you notice that there are strengths in these children which are very evident, use the strengths to bring about your academics. So, get him to draw the math problems and then write it down into the math thing. So drawing is one thing, especially with a lot of young children. I have spent considerable amount of time, in the younger classes, particularly grade 1 and 2, where a lot of the foundational skills are usually taught. And whether the children are good artists, whether they have a talent for drawing or not, I insist on drawing for all children, and this is regardless of whether they have learning issues or not. And I have found through my 30 years of experience, children enjoy that. It makes the concepts far more clearer to them. And then the same thing, sometimes I end up doing it as an art and craft activity also, like she said, the collage part of it. You can bring a math problem into it. You can say, okay, why don't you take two shapes and two circles, and probably use three triangles, and then put them together and make a collage, or create something. So the child can create it and then write a math problem that relates to it. So, okay, two circles, write two circles plus, or draw two circles plus three squares equals five shapes altogether. So use whatever strengths. If the child does have strengths, use those. And the more you use these kind of activities, the more meaning it makes to them, rather than just seeing things as numbers or letters or words in print. Most of our children particularly respond very well to pictures and objects, and especially things which are tangible. So do that. And that will definitely help. Maybe the only thing is, see, what teachers worry about or parents worry about is, okay, there are 10 problems to solve. For all the 10, doing it this way takes so much time. What I normally say is it's not important to do those 10. If the child can do only 5 or maybe 3 problems, but if they do it with this, drawing the pictures or putting the things, and that concept is understood, then the speed will catch up later on. So initially go slow on the number of problems they do, but focus on the procedure, the why you're doing that and how you're doing that of the problem. And once you focus on that, once that is thorough, the speed can come with time, with practice.
Right. Hope that helps you, Tani. The
And
next one is
also,
from
just add on, if the child does have moderate ADHD, plan your activities. I had said this before also. Don't give one, an activity that stretches too long. Give breaks in between, and do things like that. You can even do things like, I even when I'm giving a problem, for example, I give a worksheet, and instead, if it says 5 plus 3, I don't tell them, okay, just do it there. I just tell them, okay, why don't you go up, walk up, bring back 5 beads, then walk up again, bring back 3 beads, and then put them together and tell me the answer. So the child is doing the walking around, right? So you're not gluing the child to the tabletop and getting them to squirm in their seat and not focus on the activity. If they learn through movement, use that movement as a thing. You can even use things like clapping or tapping on the desk, and even little things like that can be used to teach math skills.
definitely. Hope that answers your question, Tani, and a lot of people here have been advised it too. The next one is from S. Chandra. So, what is being asked is children who are slow at maths calculations prefer to use the calculator and then they tend to become quite fast at it. Is the use of calculator or any such electronic gadget advisable?
Ideally, yes. Why shouldn't it be? But having said that, you have to. The problem here comes when it comes to our board examinations, and it depends on each board. Certain boards do allow the use of calculators. When in that case, it is not at all a problem, because you can train them right from the younger. If they know how to do it and what to do, when to use what calculation. For the mechanical calculation, they can still use the calculator, because the reasoning and everything is fine. So they should be allowed to. But having said that, you might have to check with the board system where the child is learning, whether they are allowing calculator as an option in the board exams. So the problem here comes if some of the boards do not allow that, and that is where. But in those cases, they do usually they have a subject drop option, and then many of these children then go for a subject drop option, and then instead of that they take some other option, which is like IT or painting or music or something like that, and then they compensate for that. But again, for a life skill, yeah, use calculator. Why not? Nowadays everybody uses calculator, so why shouldn't that be allowed? But some of our boards are still way behind, so we have to bear with that.
Definitely. Okay. The next one is from Carmelita. Carmelita is asking us if there are any possible ways that you would suggest to identify dyscalculia in the early years of a child.
What I talked about, like the underlying skills and processes, being able to sort and classify, being able to match, being able to count by rote, being able to, see things and say, okay, it is this much number. All these are indicators. If you find right from the, even as young as like 3 years of age, most children learn to match colors, match shapes. And if you find they're having trouble with that, or they're not or sometimes they match it but um, they don't necessarily identify it. So these are possible indicators of learning problems later on. And if they're not able to counting again, when most children, they like to recite A to Z, or 1 to 10 when they are very young. And when they are counting itself, you find them skipping numbers in that sequence. That could be an indicator. that despite teaching them several times, if they're still skipping it, and you still have to give prompts to get them back on track, that is an indicator. So all these skills and processes that I mentioned about earlier in this webinar, all those things, sorting and classifying, grouping of objects according to, similarities and differences, all these underlying processes, if the child has difficulties in, it is an indicator that they may be at risk for a math issue later on.
Sure. Okay, so we will take two last questions for today. The first one is from Maria. Maria is asking if you could suggest some methods and how can you manage teaching a blind child who also has difficulty in understanding maths. So, what are some of the strategies or tips that you would suggest here?
Uh, to be very honest, I have not really worked with children who have complete visual impairment. So I'm completely ignorant of, all I can say is because they have visual issues, definitely they learn better through the tactile, through the tactile modality. So obviously they have to feel things. Having said that, many of the people who are visually impaired, usually we find they are not very they're pretty okay with math. But if they do still have trouble with math, again, tactile is, as far as my limited knowledge goes, okay, one modality is absent or deficient in them, use the other modality, so which is more like, use the tactile, which is far more tangible for them. Otherwise, personally speaking, I'm not really worked with children who have complete visual impairment. So I may not be a very good person to give a lot of advice on that.
Sure, but maybe the tactile modality would help. Okay, moving to the last question for the day. This is from Harini Rajesh. Harini is asking us if the child is good with numbers but has difficulty in understanding abstract concepts or word problems, how and what could be done to teach them better? If the question is explained to the child, then the child is able to do the arithmetic part. So, how can you help such children?
When you talk about word problems, again, I had mentioned about teaching the key vocabulary. So, getting them to read it, it is basically reading comprehension. When we talk about word problems, it is not really math. It is trying to understand the language, read that event, what is happening in that story problem, translate that into tangibles like pictures or beads or whatever, and understand what is that event happening there, and based on that, and of course in the word problems there'll be certain clue words which give you an indication, these vocabulary which has to be targetedly taught. For example, you will have what is the total, or how many if it is a subtraction problem, usually you'll have things like how many are left, or five ducks were swimming in a pond, two of them left, or two of them went away. So things like go away, went away, or more are coming and joining a group, that event has to be made apparent to the child. And when that event is happening, what is the math operation that you do? So trying to connect the math operation to the event that is happening in the story problem. That is the connection you have to get them to understand and do. What I do is I get them to read each sentence in the word problem, circle the numbers, write the numbers up, set the problem. So for example, if 5 is the number, okay, write 5 and then draw 5. Draw 5 objects or keep 5 objects. And then if there is 3, okay, keep 3 and draw 3. And then the numbers have been written 5 and 3, one below the other. And then read the question, like how many are there altogether, or how many are left, how many are there now. Read the question and get them to process what is it that they're asking in the question. Now in the question, many a time there are clue words which says total, altogether. So all this will relate to addition. If there is left, went away, go away, or eaten, finished, all this will relate to subtraction. If it is multiplication, usually the value for one is given and more similar ones they have to find out. Division, it will be the opposite. For more, they would have given a value and they'll be asking you to find the each. For one, you have to find. So these clue words have to be taught and how it connects to whichever operation. And again, picturize them. Picturize them. One of the best methods is to picturize them as much as possible and do it. And if it is in a large classroom, I usually use the children themselves. I ask them to come forward as numbers, and so that other children can really watch what is happening. And then so connect the key vocabulary and the event of the story problem and how you can write up the math problem relating to that. And what sign once you write the numbers, then the next thing is what sign you should put. So depending on the clue words, depending on the question they are asking in the word problem, you have to decide, should it be a plus? Should it be multiplication? Should it be subtraction? So making those connections over and over again. That is what helps children understand word problems. Again, slowly go step by step. Read each sentence in the word problem and translate it into the number as well as the picture. Go sentence by sentence.
Sure. Thank you so much, Geetha ji. That was amazing answers to the questions asked from our very engaged and interested community members. And thank you once again for the wonderful series that you have conducted. Dear attendees, we would request you all to please fill the feedback, and that would help us improve your experience further. So please do share your feedback about today's session and the past sessions that you have attended. And if you would like to attend our upcoming webinar on how to supercharge your career as a special educator, do find the link in the chat box to register for the series. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. That brings us to the end of the session. Geetha ji, your final parting words.
I've really enjoyed this whole series of webinars with SLT, and you've had a wonderful audience. Many of them even giving in a lot of their not just their feedback, even things that they are doing with their children, which has worked, which is a very positive thing. I've learned personally. I've learned a lot from them as well. So it's been a wonderful give and take, and a really beautiful journey that we've had. But of course, nothing to be said about ability. You always have a very good standard in when it comes to hosting these events. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and connecting me with such a wonderful group as ability, as well as such a wonderful participatory audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you so much for making it to the sessions despite keeping unwell. Thank you so much.
I'm in for a big rest, I think, after this.
Yeah. Definitely. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. That brings us to the end of session. See you again